I never used to believe that dreams could hurt you. They were just figments of the imagination, flashes of images and emotions that disappeared with the morning light. At least, that's what I thought, until the night that changed everything. It started innocently enough. I was having a rough week at work, dealing with stress, deadlines, and the usual office drama. By the time Friday night rolled around, I was exhausted. All I wanted was to sleep and forget about everything for a while. That night, I fell into bed and drifted off almost instantly. But instead of the usual disjointed dreams, I found myself standing in a place that felt too real. I was in a house, one I'd never seen before. It was old, with creaking wooden floors, and the air was thick with dust. The windows were covered with heavy, tattered curtains, and the only light came from a flickering candle on a small table in the corner of the room. I could feel the chill in the air, the rough texture of the floor under my bare feet. Everything was so vivid, so detailed, that it didn't feel like a dream at all. It felt like I had stepped into another world, one that was cold and unwelcoming. I looked around, trying to make sense of where I was. The room was empty except for a worn-out chair, the table with the candle, and a large mirror hanging on the wall. The mirror caught my eye, and I found myself drawn to it, even though every instinct told me to look away. As I approached the mirror, I saw my reflection. But something was off. My face looked pale, almost sickly, and my eyes seemed darker than usual, hollow and sunken. But it wasn't just my appearance that unsettled me. It was the way my reflection was moving. It wasn't following my movements exactly. There was a delay, a lag, as if it was acting on its own. I stepped back and my reflection did the same, but with that same eerie delay. My heart began to race as I watched it closely. Then, without warning, it smiled. A slow, cruel smile that didn't match the terror I felt. My reflection was mocking me, and I felt a surge of panic. I turned away from the mirror, my pulse pounding in my ears. I needed to get out of that house. But as I moved toward the door, I heard a creaking noise behind me. I froze, dread creeping up my spine. I turned back to the mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. The reflection was no longer in the mirror. It was gone. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the room, my eyes wide with fear. The candle flickered, casting long, ominous shadows on the walls. I was alone, or at least, I hoped I was. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. Suddenly, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty room. My fear was growing, a primal terror that I couldn't shake. I ran to the door and tried to open it, but the knob wouldn't turn. I was trapped. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but my voice echoed back at me, hollow and empty. No one was coming. I was on my own. Then I heard it. A whisper, faint at first, but growing louder. It was coming from the walls, the floor, the very air around me. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was malevolent, full of malice, and it was coming closer. I backed away from the door, my eyes darting around the room, searching for a way out. There was none. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it was a chorus of voices, all speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, and I felt like I was being watched from every angle. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I whipped my head around to look, but again, there was nothing there. The shadows on the walls seemed to be shifting, growing darker, and the candlelight flickered wildly, as if struggling to stay alive. My panic was rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was just a dream, I told myself. I just needed to wake up. But no matter how hard I tried to will myself awake, I couldn't. The dream held me in its grip, and the fear was all too real. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the whispers that bowled the darkness. I focused on my breathing, trying to slow my racing heart. But then I felt it. A hand, cold and clammy, gripping my arm. I screamed and jerked away, my eyes snapping open. But when I looked down at my arm, there was nothing there. The whispers had stopped, but the silence was even worse. It was heavy, oppressive, and I could feel something in the room with me, something I couldn't see. My instincts told me to run, but where? There was no escape. I backed up against the wall, my body trembling, and waited for whatever was coming. The shadows seemed to close in around me, the darkness growing thicker, until I could barely see the room anymore. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall and thin, with long, bony fingers and hollow, empty eyes. Its face was twisted into a grotesque smile, and its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones. It moved slowly toward me, its eyes locked on mine, and I felt a wave of cold terror wash over me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed with fear as the figure reached out toward me, its fingers inches from my face. I wanted to scream or run, but I was frozen in place, helpless as it came closer. Just as its fingers brushed my cheek, I woke up. I sat bolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I was in my room, safe in my bed. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just a horrible, vivid dream. But as I looked around the room, something felt wrong. The shadows seemed darker, the air colder. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed the mirror on the wall. It was the same one from my dream. I slowly got out of bed, my legs trembling, and approached the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but this time it was normal. No delays, no eerie smiles, just me. But the fear lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the dream as just that, a dream. But as I turned away from the mirror, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. Flash of movement. I spun around. The mirror was empty. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to leave the room to get as far away from the mirror as possible. But before I could move, I felt that cold breath on the back of my neck again. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Slowly, I turned around, and there it was, the figure from my dream, standing right behind me, its hollow eyes staring into mine. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure leaned in close, its cold, clammy hand reaching for me again. And this time, I knew I wasn't going to wake up. The last thing I saw was its twisted smile, inches from my face, before everything went black. When I woke up the next morning, I was still in my bed, the morning light streaming through the window. But the memory of the dream was fresh in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a dream. I felt a cold, lingering dread in the pit of my stomach, as if the figure was still there, watching me. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw it again. Just for a split second. Flicker of movement, shadow behind me. When I turned around, there was nothing there. The dream hasn't left me since. Every night, I see that same house, same mirror, that same figure. And every night, it gets a little closer. I don't know how much longer I can take it before it finally catches me. I just hope I wake up before it does.